Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, well-noticed post covering finance and property news. It's another Monday evening, and Edwin is back for another rant. Hi, Edwin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Martin. I'm doing well, but the clouds are out in your end of town, and the sun's out here. So it's a mixed bag of it's a bit of mixed bag as to what's happening with the property market as well. So is it going to storm here? Is the sun going to shine? It depends on what side of the fence you're on, right? Whether you're a buyer or you're a seller.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of conflicting information, and we had a week of beautiful autumn sunshine here in the UK, and then we've had a month's rain over the last couple of days, and more storms forecast for the rest of this week. So everyone is now sort of swimming to work this morning. But yeah, it is interesting watching what's going on, and there are so many conflicting signals, Edwin, in terms of how to interpret everything that's in play at the moment. I think a good place to start this commentary might be just briefly to touch on what happened with the Fed, because the Fed, of course, dropped rates and more substantially than they expected. But the articles were basically saying, oh, it's bigger than expected, 0.5%. Fed rate cut is nothing to celebrate. Questions about, has the Fed overreacted? Why did they cut so hard? Is it because they can see recession coming? But more importantly for Australia, of course, does that put heat on the RBA to cut rates quicker? But on the other hand, we had the 4.2% jobs employment number, which was quite strong, and the jobs market could delay the cuts here in Australia. So I issued a post the other day called "The Rate Cut Dance Begins, but you're not invited." And everyone's expecting more RBA hawkishness, of course. The jobs data is the root cause of that. Patience is significant and important. Productivity is bad, but investors should not expect a rate cut this side of Christmas. In fact, HSBC is talking about second half, maybe in the middle of the year, and he only sees 2 points of rate cuts in 2025. So not much to see. Joy was pretty much the same, but it's about uncertainty. Nobody quite knows what's going on. And yet, of course, migration still bubbles higher. So the latest numbers were much higher than expected. And that puts perhaps more demand side pressure on property in Australia. And by the way, the iron ore price also slipped. People are now talking about $80. So economic pressure. So wherever you look, Edwin, the context for this conversation is uncertainty about the future trajectory of rate cuts in Australia, pressure because of high migration, so more demand for property, and yet also more people perhaps under pressure because of those high interest rates and the cost of living still there, of course. And so, which side of the fence? Interestingly, there was another article which I'll just share with you because I thought it was quite funny. Of course, 4 interest rate cuts in Australia could spark a housing price boom, wrote Aidan Devine on the 17th of September. So, which side of the street are you, Edwin?
Look, I'm getting some blisters up my backside. I'm sitting on the fence. It's look. The question for the question really that you and I've been talking about is how politicized is the RBA, and we're soon going to find out how politicized it is. And I mean, you and I have got our opinions, and and is the pressure from the Greens going to be enough? Is the thumb on that scale going to be enough to persuade the Albo and Co to put more pressure on the RBA? I mean, we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but all we know is that my prediction number 10 from the beginning of the year, it looks like it may come to pass if Albo keeps on losing his popularity. And it's all to do with housing. It's all to do with affordability and interest rates and everything, and then you've got as I said, the pressure. So he's in a bit of a dilemma. So Albo and Co Real Estate Partners are in a bit of a jam, Martin. So it's a wait and see what they're going to do and how they're going to, are they going to, behind the doors, we don't know. But I mean, how much are they going to influence it? Oh, look, Dusty's still on the, she's still sitting on the side of the fact that we will see a rate cut before the end of the year. But that's Dusty. Evan's sitting on the fence with me. But you've got to look at all these. You got to look at all these things, playing out, and then obviously, I mean, that's for us to just to chew the cud, I mean, just have a bit of banter, but it is influence political decisions and or the politicization of the RBA. One has to question how far does that go back, because there is a strong correlation. So I am paying close attention as to what the Greens are saying, also what they are doing to stifle the progress in the things that the Labor Party want to implement. And they're really becoming a really big thorn in the flesh. It's becoming more like a dagger or a two-edged sword. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. But let's see how it plays out, because I'd say we're going to get a lot more coverage. People are, what we are seeing on the streets. People are sitting on the sideline waiting. There's still a lot of money nonetheless on the sidelines from what we see in the areas that we're actively looking for clients. That's not every market of Sydney, of course, but in the regions that we're looking at, there is still a lot of money. But people are just being not so much. They still feel that there'll be a lot more listings come on market, and there are some suburbs that had one or two listings last week, and they've got nothing this week, and had one listing the week before. So there are some areas and some suburbs, as I said, some markets that there's hardly any, or if any, properties on market, and then you look at the adjoining suburbs, and they're still in demand. So it comes back to a lot of factors, but it's going to be interesting to see, Martin. Are they telling us? What are they telling us without telling us? Is the thing, because a lot of it, I think the shameful part of it is a lot of the fanfare as to the popularity of the individual that's that's at the helm. If they don't feel that they're as popular, and if celebrities are distancing themselves from them, they'll tack a different way so that they can regain that popularity. I mean, where are our leaders at the moment? But getting selfies in all over the world. That's where they've been for the last 3 years. Traveling all over the world, getting selfies with celebrities and other politicians. But when it comes to defending our borders, or when I say defending, when it comes to securing our borders and looking at the well-being of the Aussie battlers, those that are looking for that peaceful enjoyment of life and longevity of having a roof over their heads. And again, I say, whether it be a rental or whether it be as an owner occupier by way of a purchasing of a property, that's what people are looking for, that security. But that seems to be a distant dream at the moment.
Well, it is about politics, and politics, it isn't necessarily about the interests of ordinary people, as I've said quite a few times, and of course with the election now, somewhere between now and the middle of next year, this will be a big issue. Albo's now coined the nopposition. So in other words, the Liberals and the Greens, they're all saying no to everything. And so he sort of bunched them together in a press conference actually held today in Canberra. And that was actually to cover predominantly the ACCC report on Coles and Woolies, and whether they've actually been rorting some of the prices there. We might come back to that. But going back to the specific comment that you made about the RBA, The fact that the Greens are now saying that they won't actually support the idea of the two boards unless the RBA lowers interest rates, it's a key condition of their support now, means it's probably likely that will get pushed out beyond the election. And it does beg the question, obviously, of what is the relationship between the government and the RBA, because on one hand, the government says, no, the RBA is completely independent and they can do whatever they need to do to control the monetary levers. But then, of course, what they've done is, from a fiscal perspective, is thrown a lot of money back into the economy to support people and to do various announceables, all designed predominantly to get re-elected, but in some cases pushing inflation higher. And in fact, the RBA, of course, has said, well, we're not going to actually take account of those short-term support measures like the electricity support, because that's going to disappear again. And so they look at the underlying inflation numbers, which are still much higher in Australia relative to other parts of the world. And frankly, there is very little evidence that I see that the inflation in Australia is going to come down. We will get some more data shortly, and that'll be interesting to see. But the ANZ was suggesting that inflation will come in, the core inflation, at 3.7%, which means essentially there is little room at the moment for the RBA to drive those rates lower. And the consequences of these higher rates, of course, is the question. And, I've spoken at some length about the impact on real households. And so there are households that are really finding it very, very difficult to be able to get themselves in the property market. There have been quite a few reports this week, which you probably saw, with, $220,000 wages can't buy most houses in various parts of Australia. This is actually work from the PropTrack housing affordability report, and it showed that, with an income around the average, you've got almost no hope of getting into the property market. And of course, that resonated through all the various papers. So you can see here, Queensland, tough for even those on $200,000, with some advice to how to bargain. 200K income is not enough. Housing affordability is its worst since the global financial crisis, and Queensland is earning 200K are struggling to buy without the bank of mum and dad. And housing affordability is an all-time low. And this is, again, from that same report. So it's quite interesting how a single report gets a lot of coverage in the various papers. We see this all the time, of course, and so it's the latest story. But let's face it, the reason that housing affordability is shot is partly because of interest rates, but the tax take is higher than it's been ever. So actually, the average Australian is paying way more in tax. And of course, the cost of living, because of that high inflation, has been significantly increasing over the last 2 or 3 years. And of course, whilst inflation is coming down a little, prices aren't coming down. They're just not rising as fast. And then, of course, you've got the real truth, the horrible truth, that for many people, their income over the last decade or so in real terms have not increased in real terms after inflation. And whilst there have been some income improvements for some people and some adjustments of low pay recently, a lot of households are really under pressure. So that is one lens through which we need to look at the property market. So there's a real desperation. People are trying to find places to live. We also know that rental, of course, is another problem. It's still rising quite fast. And there was some interesting shenanigans that went on over the last week with people in the property sector claiming that the rental sector and high rents was not actually impacted by international students, although they cherry-picked data back through COVID when there were very low numbers of students, whereas in fact, and other people said, and in fact the government actually said, no, it's about 7% of rental property in the student sector, but in some postcodes, it's more than half. And so, cherry picking the numbers, you can spin the argument. Otherwise, I actually made a show about this yesterday, trying to make the point that this data is not content free, right? This data is used to support one side of the argument or the other side of the argument. So the universities are saying, well, no, we need more students because they're actually good for Australia, although the way they calculate that is suspect, as we discussed previously. On the other hand, other people are saying, no, actually the rental sector is under huge pressure because of this massive influx of students, and you should dial it back. But again, comes back to a political discussion about what to do about migration. And so it's all messed up again. And I come back to this simple point, Edwin. Whatever you look at from a property perspective, you can't look at it in purely rational, economic, or even valuation terms. You've got to also have the political overlay too and understand what the game really is.
And you've hit the nail on the head. You've really got to understand what the game is. And you've got to really make yourself, you've got to open yourself up for those, to have those real discussions and those and have that understanding. And the unfortunate thing, Martin, is many that are looking into the property market, looking at getting in or looking at even getting out, they don't really understand. They don't really understand the game. They don't really understand what's happening. Yep. Yes, we have been more educated over the last, particularly over the last 5-7 years. We've gained a lot more in terms of information, data, and there are more articles. There are more's being spoken of in social media forums and similar to shows like the Monday evening property rants like ours and others. But the unfortunate thing is a lot go to focus on what other commentators are saying and how they're cherry picking their information and their data and how they want to spin it. And that's it's helpful. It's helpful when you're trying to look at an overall view of the markets. If that's your bent, but for the individuals that are looking at getting into the market in a specific region, suburb, or region or suburb for whatever means, it can be very fraught with a lot of danger even on face value by those that are wanting to come in and by the open door policies that we've had with regards to immigration and the competition that's brought to many households. But not only that, Martin, but then there's also the underlying issues of properties that we often talk about, we often discuss and bring up to drive home to people that you don't want to be buying in these economic uncertainties. Whether you believe property prices are going to go up, whether you believe property prices are going to go down, as I always say to our clients over and over again, and that is that we try to get if we buy a property, our aim is to buy a property on market value on the day, and we assess that market value based also on mitigating any uncertainty with the economic climate, and that which leads to the condition of the property, those things that other selling agents and other bodies aren't telling you, and the issues around high-rise developments if you're into apartments or even older apartments. So it's an array of a lot of things that have got to be put together and welded or gelled together. But the unfortunate thing is, it's the ones that have the greater noise, and this is why I say, like, as much as you, myself, and others like to think that we're looking at a property market or an economic cycle, it may have been the case. It may have been the case to a greater extent pre-2020. But moving forward, I mean, all I'm seeing, or not all that I'm seeing, but one of the major factors that I am seeing is how politics and policy has taken a stronger position and a more prominent position in deciding as to what the markets do or don't do. And in our case, look, government policy positions have stifled basically the basic simple principles of supply and demand. I mean, many are hoping that there'll be a lot more supply over the spring season, But when you look at it, when you really drive down and look at the numbers, drill down into the numbers, dear Lord, for being an international city, we've only got 8,400 or so properties on market that are freestanding homes on market, and 8,600 or so apartments on market in an international city like ours. I mean, that's just a drop in the ocean when you think about it. And of course, government policy and decisions that they make or not make are going to influence our markets. But and the question is how how much do they manipulate those decisions to feather their own nests, and in so doing to also and I'd say it because it's there, and it's the political class have got perhaps just as many, if not more, investment properties than the real estate industry has as well.
Oh, you're saying that they might have a vested interest in what happens to property prices. Well, that's a shocking and surprising observation, Edwin, but I think you're probably right, because statistically speaking, you know and I know that the average politician has significantly more investment properties than the average Australian. So, maybe that's a factor to bear in mind. It's interesting that there was some reporting here about New South Wales home prices, and the Valuer General, Sally Dale, said that property values will flatline this year as interest rates bite after strong growth last year. And the question, of course, is what's going to happen. Now, she did make the point that it varies. And it was quite interesting that she was talking about some of the valuations, for example, out in the agricultural shires in the central west, like those of Bogan, where values have been up 29%. But she's pointed to auction clearance rates in Sydney softening, and agreed with Louis Christopher that after 6 months of price gains in the first half of the calendar year, values will fall in the second half, leaving residential property in the New South Wales capital up only marginally for the year as a whole. So owners will have to revise expectations, Ms. Dale, of course, has the office to set the price of unimproved land, and also for maintaining the information about property. And in New South Wales, you can actually find information out, in other states less so. But then, of course, if you look at it like this is another report. Buyer's market appears to be here, but not for long. Auction clearance rates dropped to their second lowest point this year. And some experts say that the buyer's market may last a few months. Louis Christopher said the long-awaited cash rate drop would revive competition. We're quite confident the market will bounce once we see the first interest rate cut, and notice that the fundamental mismatch between supply and demand meant the market was experiencing a moderate downturn, not a crash. So you can see here how these stories are working out. And again, it's worth it, I think, underscoring. You've got to go granular and look locally. You can't take these aggregate averages. But I think it's important to understand that the dynamics are definitely on the change. And I also want to highlight the other point you made, and we're going to actually pick this up tomorrow in our show, our live show, Edwin, about the quality of the property that people are purchasing, because it's not just about the price. It's also got exactly what you are buying. And so we're going to go into this in a bit more detail tomorrow. Both you and I have looked at or are looking at properties on a relatively regular basis from a building surveyor perspective. And so some of the faults and defects that people have. And unfortunately, many people are still buying properties with massive amounts of unexpected expenditure that follows. And so whatever the fair market value is for a good property, of course, if the property has defects, then of course you need to be negotiating those on the way in before you actually complete the purchase, rather than actually buying a fair value property and then spending hundreds of thousands of dollars subsequent to just bring it up to a standard. So, I mean, this is a really, really important conversation. I think actually, Edwin, now it's probably more critical than ever, simply because of this. A lot of the property that's coming on the market for listing currently is ex-investment property, or what I call second tier property in some cases, where there's defects under the hood. And so whether you're a first-time buyer struggling to find anything to buy, or whether you're a property investor thinking of buying an investment property, or perhaps somebody trading up or trading down, actually understanding the nature of the specific property that you are looking to purchase is never been more critical.
Look, that's so true. And the unfortunate thing, Martin, is that again we've got government policy on tow that was, you know, was enacted, or what was, you know, the guides were, the regulations were put in place to assist and to help those that are looking at buying. But in actual fact, it's created the opposite. And this is why I bang on about all the time, and that is, you know, do your own building report, because everything the selling agent, just about, yeah, everything that they do is you know, they're looking at working on behalf and in favour of the vendor, which is the opposite party. And this is what people have got to really understand, and got to just, it's got to be crystal clear. It's got to be crystallized in their head, in their minds, and that is that the agents aren't working on their behalf, and they're providing all these documentations in order to create urgency to, you know, to facilitate a quicker sale, which also puts more money in the back, more money or quicker money in the back pocket, so that they can go and pay off the leases for the new BMW or Tesla that they've just purchased in their Armani suits, whatever the case may be. But it's in that, the unfortunate thing is, because of, you know, they've sort of bent the policy that the previous governments have, you know, state governments have put in place in order to assist you as a purchaser to buy a property by obtaining a building and pest report. Well, you know, the unfortunate thing is the people that provide those reports aren't doing it. They say they're doing it, you know, at arm's length, but they're not, because they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, and they're not going to. And in order for the, you know, for them to be called back to do other building and pest reports for that agency or that agent, you know, you've got to look after them. So therefore, you've got to turn a blind eye. And as we spoke last week, this is where then they cling to the deregulation of 1989, where that industry was deregulated, and their standards basically say, you know, unless it's a major issue, they don't have to note it down. But major issue in whose eyes? You know, what's major? Is $1,000 repair a minor issue, or a major issue is 10,000? You know, what do you know, on the surface, you may think it just, you know, the wall needs a lick of paint, a coat of paint. But when you look beyond it and you sort of find out, hold on a minute, this wall is party wall to the bathroom, to the adjoining bathroom, and this is where the shower recess area is sits, and you know, it's a bigger issue. So, you know, on the one hand, the agent, the building inspector, are saying to you, hey, it's only a, you know, $100 repair job. You know, it's just a lick of paint. You know, just go grab yourself a paintbrush, a roller from Bunnings, and you know, and Bob's your uncle. So, but when you start digging deeper, you find that you're up for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in rectification work. So this is where I've you know, I really bang on about these sort of things, and the fact that there has to be a greater governance over that area of material fact. Has to, you know, the punishment has to hold stronger weight. There has to be you know, as I say, greater governance over material fact and what constitutes material fact, and these, and we really need to look. The government really needs to look at that other aspect of you know, being given. But then, you know, we sit back. I mean, how long do you have to argue with all these policies? Because at the end of the day, it really comes back to, caveat emptor, buyer beware. So it's a vicious circle. But yes, going back to your point, Martin, you're not only paying top dollar for a second-rate property, but then you also got to pay a hell of a lot more in the rectification work, and the banks aren't going to necessarily lend you that money on top of the loans, particularly after within weeks or months after you've just purchased, and you're in the hog for a mil or two, and you got to pay that down. So it's not going to be favourable, and things are only going to get worse.
Yeah, and it is, of course, worth underscoring that the costs of the construction sector continue to go up, whether that's for just small repairs or whether it's for building. In fact, Fletchers, the big New Zealand company, came out and said that the rising costs were absolutely killing them, and the number of new dwellings being built in Sydney and Melbourne have been well under the decade average, as we've discussed. But they're also saying that the cost of everything is gone through the roof, literally. And that's true if you are a small homeowner, just a single property that you need to have work done. So if you try and get anybody to come and do anything, then you're going to be paying a lot more than previously. And I think that's worth just bearing in mind when you think about what are the costs of rectifications. And the reports will often not highlight minor things, but even the major things, when they actually put a stake in the ground and say, well, you might have an issue with your roof, they're pretty unspecific about what the costs of rectification might be. Or they say, well, the electricity system might actually need to be inspected and maybe replaced. Well, they don't actually tell you what the cost of that replacement would be. So even if you get the survey done, that's not the end of the story, right? When you actually start seeing issues. So you've got to go through this methodical process. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow. And we're going to show a few examples of some defects and talk a little bit about that context. But the broader picture here is people need to be quite careful. And there was this article that came out, actually, short-term house flippers hit a sweet spot. So this is actually the Core and Logix data. And they looked at properties that have switched within the last 4 years. And they were saying that quite a few people actually made quite big bucks. The number of short-term resellers rose sharply since September last year. The potential to make massive capital gains in a short period of time enticed a lot of homeowners to cash in, especially in WA, Queensland, and South Australia. So short-term selling has become more common because it's become more profitable. Now, it's interesting, of course, that they quote the capital movement. They do, of course, in that article highlight the fact that this excludes the costs. So it includes the transaction costs, the selling and buying costs, and the stamp duty and all those things. And of course, if it's an investment property, there might be capital gains to play. So it rather over eggs the cake. But the point I want to make, Edwin, is that this story of massive capital appreciation is only giving you half the story, right? And so coming right back to what we said on the way in, when you take a fair market value, think about what the impact might be in terms of actually bringing the property up to a level that's appropriate. That's a cost. And then when you actually come to sell it, well, you might be okay, you might not. But with property values looking as though they're easy in some areas, particularly in Melbourne, well, you won't find many people who flipped in the last 2 or 3 years in Melbourne and have made significant profits. So it looks as though it depends where you look and how you look. So a lot of the examples here in this was for South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, and Bayside in New South Wales, by the way, as well. So it just shows you that there's more to it. You've got to sort of peel back the onion and think about it in more detail if you want to make good decisions.
Yeah, you've also got to look at state government policy and the local council, the instruments that they're going to be, whether or not they're going to be changing the building instruments or codes, whatever, and also the state government policy, how that's going to impact the potential gain that you may think you have or you may budget on. But it is look, it's a different game for different different individuals. The ones that have they're in the know, because as I always say, if you want to start playing that game, well, you better become real close. You better become real chummy with the real estate agents, because the selling agents are the ones that get first dibs at anything that's got a good upside anyway.
Yeah.
And if it's not them, if it's not themselves personally, it'll be the close relatives, and then friends and or associates. But when I say associates, people that they work with, and that will give them the property back to resell to to another commission. I'm not saying that always happens, but that is one way to hedge your the money that you're going to make. I mean, it's not. It's stories make it sound real. How can I put it? Rosy, but then it doesn't always work well.
Spot on. And I also think it's very entertaining and important to understand, Edwin, what the WeChat chatters are thinking, because they're actually, well, they're basically saying we're in a holding pattern. I would say is that the good way to interpret it?
So these are the WeChat chatters that are investors that are what we talk about, the ones that are predominantly going toe to toe with your first home buyers or people that are trying to get into the market just to have a principal place of residence. So these investors, they're basically saying, well, the majority of them have already bought. So now they're sitting back and they're going to wait and see, because they believe that we're in a period of time that they call the, I'm just literal translation from what they were saying. They call it the useless time or garbage time. And this is what they feel that we're in at the moment. In terms of Australia as well as globally, because they're just waiting for some sort of a reset as well. They don't see the future to be too bright in terms of the economies around the world, employment. So they're just going to wait it out for a little bit. And now this garbage time, as they call it, is likened onto, let's say, you've got two football teams. And it's 10 minutes to go, and one of the teams is up by 40, 50 points, and the other teams and there's only 10 minutes to go. So the spectators, those watching the game, in those 10 minutes, 10, 15, or even 20 minutes, the last 20 minutes, it's what they call garbage time. You're just sitting there, you know the outcome already. So they feel that things aren't going to get prettier for the Australian economy overall. So they're just going to sit back and just see how things play out. Globally, they're saying things with regard to mainland China because of all the uneasiness there as well. And again, they're also in that period of time. So to them, to the majority of them, they're you've been waiting for a major reset, whether it be through major economic downturn or major wars, whatever. They're just sitting back. But these are the investors. That's not to say that they're those that are looking at downsizing or upsizing or buying for a principal place of residence there, of the WeChat chatter of persuasion, that they're not doing it. They're going to continue to do that like everybody else. This is just the investment group. The other interesting thing that they were talking about was and the reason why they feel that the investor groups, they feel that we're headed for a greater uncertain times, is because they see that they're talking that they're seeing Australia as the koala, the koala of the world. And this was an interesting analogy, right? So they say that they see us like they see Australia as being cute, like a koala, cute, harmless, and forever high. And I said to Dusty, what the hell are they going on about? They said, well, look, we appeal to the world. That's the cuteness of Australia. So a lot of people want to come and live here. A lot of people want to come and park, have it as a second home. Big shots want to have investment properties here and use it as as getaways from wherever they live and so forth. So we're cute. We're the place to be. We've been cute for the last 18 months, as you and I've been sharing on the rant. We're we're harmless because they're saying that we're still highly dependent on the US. And if the US don't invest in Australia, we're up. We're up the creek without a paddle. And if we don't do the bidding of the US, and hence the reason why they're saying that that's a real reason for the envoy for Chalmers to go over to China was to really talk him down because he's getting antsy with the CCP are getting antsy and G in particular wants to press the let's go to war button. So we're supposed to be there to cool things down and also to strengthen our position with the iron ore, which is really not happening, as well as our agricultural sector is really being hit hard as well. So in that sense, they're saying that we're very because we're dependent on the US and we we do what the US tells us to do. Well, we're harmless. Not to notwithstanding what they were saying about our military, with steam engine boats, I guess, and we're forever high, Martin. And lo and behold, we're forever high on the one thing, and that's the Ponzi scheme, the property. We're forever high on property, and that seems to be the major focus that the governments of all persuasions are focusing on. That's where they get most of a major part of their incomes from, by way of taxes and duties and everything else. So then we've and the rest of the population's just just doing as the head tells them to do, and that is focusing on property, and that is the unfortunate thing. So so they've likened us to a koala, cute, harmless, and forever high. And that's what they're saying. But it's interesting. So I guess from what a lot of people will see in many parts of the Sydney markets, they'll start seeing less WeChat chatterers going out there looking at property from an investment point of view in those areas where they could turn a lot of the properties into budget accommodation, such as your Blacktown LGAs and your Bankstowns and those areas, your Guildfords and all that. So Albans, Lidcombs. So there will be a bit of a pullback, but in other areas where they mainly congregate or live, well, those areas are still going strong.
Yeah, very interesting. Reminds me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy summary of Earth. It was relatively harmless. So it's sort of, but the fact of the matter is that there is some interesting momentum.
Yeah, in light of what was happening and all the reports that were happening, there's a lot of confusion out there. And as I was saying to one of our buyers, I wrote back and goes in hand with what you spoke about, Louis, the reports that he gave on the previous articles that you noted, but also with a lot of the stuff that's put on online. And look, whether it's Tarek, because he puts out the reports on Saturday after the auction clearance rates as well. He has a different perspective, similar to Louis. Whether it's Tarek, Louis, Christopher, or even Domain. Auction clearance rates are but only an image or a snapshot of a day's activity, at most 3 days when they are revised. Bottom line, properties with good structure and presentation, homes that is, are being sold and for good coin all around Sydney, as you witnessed on Wednesday. Lemons, which people ask top dollar for, get passed in and stay on market for a lot longer. Even good properties, but with extremely high expectations, get passed in and take longer to sell. But guess what? They are selling in many markets. What we are seeing on the ground, strata lots being passed in and more on market. And that's one of the things that the auction clearance rate doesn't really identify, as to how many homes and how many apartments and how many strata lots, and and it doesn't really break it down. But when you look at the numbers, other numbers, and what we see on the ground, from the reports from my associates and also from the real estate agencies that we talk to, there's a lot of lot of strata lots that for one reason or another, the owners got convinced to take to auction and they linger on. On Wednesday we went to participate at an auction, and unfortunately we were unsuccessful because others were hungrier than what we were. But we reached the limit that we thought was sensible, and they just kept on going. So on Wednesday there were 10 properties at this auction. There were 10 properties that were going under the hammer on that particular night, Martin. 6 were sold on the night, and the agent tells me that 2 broke records for the areas that for the suburbs that they were in, and 1 was sold the following day. So that's a snapshot of what happens in a small area of Sydney, or a region of Sydney. So when you start talking auction clearance rates, and you start talking, depending on which way you look at it, what happens on the actual day and everything, a lot of it's emotion. Unfortunately, a lot of people get caught up in the emotion when they sell, and they get caught up in the emotion when they're buying, and that's what drives the majority of vendors and buyers. And selling agents use that to their advantage to sway a quicker sale, or to sway a quicker purchase to take more money from you.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there you talked about it's important to understand what the home is worth on the day, and also to think about the mitigation of any risks and issues that you may have, and also to minimise ongoing expenses, which means you've got to be informed. And that really comes back right to the central point of our show tomorrow, which will be, to get informed, you have to do a little bit more due diligence than perhaps a lot of people are, particularly in the current environment. And I do believe that whilst there are significant stories where prices are still rising, actually other areas where they're not, you've got to be much more careful, because you don't necessarily have that protection now of significant capital appreciation like we had post-COVID. That was an artificially created period in the market, and probably it's not going to be as so significant in the weeks and months and years ahead. So it's important to be a little bit more cautious. And talking about being cautious, I have to say I chuckled when you sent this one over. This was actually an abandoned 75 million Chinese mansion in Perth is going to auction. One of a kind sprawling Chinese mansion built on an eastern wonderway out west has hit the market. Now, this is just quite hilarious, right? And if you look at this is actually the photograph of it. What on earth is this doing in the middle of Perth, Edwin?
Well, yeah, it's one of those things. Is it more money than sense, or is it one of the best lessons of how to launder money from China? It's 75 million. It allegedly cost the individual, and it was only 90% completed. It's 2 properties sitting over 4.8 hectares, I believe. It's the developer, the individual that did his ask, was trying to recreate a traditional palace lifestyle. But I mean, this is where Dusty sort of said, started saying, well, if this individual knew his stuff, he would have realized that it's bad feng shui to try and recreate a traditional palace and live in it if you are not a direct descendant of royalty. So that in itself was bad luck. So it was doomed from the beginning, Martin. But when you look at it and you start reading into it, what other WeChat chatterers are saying about it, it does. We sort of lean more towards the side of a great lesson on how to launder money into Australia, because you can't imagine it costing $75 million to build, to buy the land and to build. But because the thing is, it got sold for $3.9 million apparently under the hammer. So
interesting mathematics there, which we won't go into any further detail. But it just shows you that there are some fascinating stories around when you actually delve into them. And talking of fascinating stories, well, we should probably just quickly look at the latest numbers because, we come back to those numbers as sort of an indicator of what's going on. This is actually the data for Sydney sales. This is on the 16th of September, 19,526. And if we drop forward a week, 19,784. So that's on the 23rd. And you can see there that the trends continue. It's still rising, and it continues to rise significantly faster than last year. But just to to give you a bit of a comparison, it's also worth noting that if you look at the 21st of September 2024, hang on a moment, what's that?
Yeah, this is the Saturday.
Okay.
Snapshot of Saturday.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, but it's interesting, Edwin, if you look at the 21st of September, so this was a couple of days before, there were 19,967. What on earth is going on?
So we've been taking snapshots of the Friday or Saturday morning of the numbers on market that are going to basically to market on the Saturday. And what we're observing is that there's a lot less property coming off market than the previous months. So there's not a lot of sales, not as many sales as going through. Hence the reason why the numbers are growing. And it's interesting. Yeah, look, for us, obviously, we look at these to give a little bit more perspective on what's happening in the market for our followers and our viewers. And it's interesting. So if our followers want to do the same, take a snapshot of either Friday night or early Saturday morning, and then another snapshot on. I take these snapshots on Mondays at specific time before our rant to share with our followers. And so I dare say that we're going to start seeing a lot of pain out there in terms of pain by way of agents themselves not transacting as quickly as they would like, and the poor little bunnies are going to have to work harder in order to earn their commission.
Yes, and the point there, of course, is that if in fact prices are perhaps a little bit less generous than they were previously, people will perhaps decide not to go ahead with an auction. And what that means is the numbers then potentially can drop. So we're watching this, I think, quite closely over the next little while. Now, in terms of Melbourne, if we just look at the Melbourne story, so on the 16th, there were 28,452. And we jump forward to Monday the 22nd at 28,678. So continued little rise there. More houses still coming on. So it's definitely not just the apartments that are actually coming on the market. It's definitely also houses. And again, I'm seeing a lot of ex-investment properties in that mix too. And if I look at Brisbane briefly, on the 16th, we had 3,856. Jump forward the 23rd, 3,894. So small rise again there. And looking at the auction statistics, Edwin, well, it is interesting. The clearance rates do look less and less attractive at the moment, don't they?
Yeah, and that's obviously going to have an emotional effect on both sides, vendors and buyers. But in actual fact, those. But when you start looking at the overall, Martin, when you start looking at the overall numbers, we've really only got. I'm talking about freestanding homes, which is the most desirable properties that people are looking for. In the majority, are looking for a freestanding home in different suburbs of Sydney. We've really only got about 1,500 or 1,600 more freestanding homes on the market than what we had same time last year. The big jumps being in strata lots or apartments, and as we've also pointed out that there's been a rise in vacant lots or land envelopes for sale as well. So this is just your general activity for spring. When you compare it to the rest of the, you've got 1,067 going under the hammer this in Sydney, in the Sydney region this coming Saturday. But at the end of the day, there's still 14,000 on market, or so more than that, 19,000 on market. Or if you just look at homes and strata lots or apartments and townhouses, that's 16,000. So it's an interesting snapshot. But I think the most interesting part is the Nine News that I picked up today, Martin. That to me is more interesting than the amount of auctions that got properties that got passed in or anything else. This is where our viewers say this is where they're smarter than your average bear, because this is where you look at what that report's saying. The report's saying a strange conundrum is unfolding in Sydney's roads. Despite a record number of cars, congestion is easing. So they're talking about the easing of congestion, predominantly around Sydney. But the most congested time, and this is where our viewers are going to pay very, very close attention, is 10 a.m. on a Saturday. So if you're selling your home and the agent tells you to put your property on the market between 10 a.m. and 12, well, tell him no way, Jose, because that is when people are going to fail to attend the open house inspections, because they usually time it along the same time. So that is the most time that Sydney roads are congested. So it's a no-go. Tell your selling agent it's a no-go for anywhere between 10 and 12. Open house and auction, because you're not going to get a lot of people through. And secondly, it will be more than likely that if you live in a congested area, that the auctioneer on the day will probably turn up late because he can't get through the traffic to get through to your auction.
And of course, if you're a prospective purchaser and you are seeing the congestion at its peak, as it were, in that period, then it's going to show the property off in its worst possible perspective from a congestion perspective too. Although I have a theory, Edwin, whilst they're saying it could be to do with the sports run, maybe it's all of these thousands and thousands of people all going to open houses across the city. Maybe, just saying, maybe. Now, we will just finish off with the rental story. So in Sydney on the 16th, there were 11,863, and on the 23rd, 11,939. So small movements there. And in Melbourne, on the 16th, 10,700 compared with 10,881. So small rises. And at this time of year, that's not necessarily that surprising. The story, of course, is that the rental pressure on households is still extreme. And I'm getting quite a few one-to-one conversations with people really struggling now to know what to do. So they're often in the rental sector, they're paying top dollar for where they are, and now they're being confronted with another rent rise, and they're trying to figure out whether they should move somewhere cheaper, but you have to move further away if you can find anywhere cheaper, or whether they try to buy. And so this is the dilemma that many people are facing. And interestingly, whilst the tax cuts have come through and some of the low-cost wage improvements have come through, for many people, they're finding that the greater proportion of their income is now required just to pay the rent. So a lot of people under pressure, unfortunately, Edwin. And I think this is going to be a very important factor going into the election. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Greens are doing what they're doing, by the way, as well.
Yeah, and you look at what Ming's just announced today. I mean, it's the no grounds eviction is etched in stone now. But as we said before, it all comes back to agents given the right amount of time, the right notices, and making sure that that's in play. And look, this is where I say, look, to our viewers, and we've said it before, this is where you really got to get to know your agent and charm your way, persuade your way into obtaining a longer term lease. You've got some that won't, but you got to try. You just can't give up. You just got to keep on trying.
So you tip of the week, really, isn't it? And I think that's a really, really important perspective here. And, I have had a few people through the one-on-one conversations just shaking their heads saying it's impossible. We can't find a way forward. And, the truth is, you may have to think differently about what is an appropriate place to find somewhere to live. But you've got to keep looking, you've got to keep questing. And, whilst we underscore the need to make sure that you are doing your homework and your due diligence, that doesn't mean you should give up. It just means there's a little bit more to do, but you'll be much more certain about the decision that you take if you do that. And for me, that's important because, unfortunately, again, in my one-on-ones, quite a few people that I speak with have made bad decisions. And, they've ended up with a lemon, as it were. And now it's a very bitter taste. And talking of bitter taste, just before we go, I want to just come back to this. This was actually the thing that came out, the ACCC alleging that Woolies and Coles fake discounts on everyday goods, which, of course, drove inflation up. And so we're going to see a lot of political shenanigans about this now. And I wonder whether anything will be done. But it's interesting that the Conservative side of politics is now saying, well, maybe we should break up the big supermarkets and break up the airlines. And again, I have to say, Edwin, that when I think about all this stuff, go right back to where we started the show, the political sphere that is now determining everything is just nutty. So if you are going to be making decisions and don't give up, you got to put your fingers in the ear and I think ignore all that political noise and just be methodical and do the work locally and don't get too caught up with some of these broader perspectives. So that's another reason why it's important not to give up. You might feel exhausted, but just keep plugging away.
100%. You got to get to that quiet place. You got to get to the quiet place when you basically shut out all the noise. Emotional. I mean, this goes for every aspect of life: buying, renting, a lot of different other aspects of life as well. And you've got to find that quiet time. I've said, and I've done it myself. I've had to go on 2-day, 3-day retreat in order to when I felt I wanted to give up. I just had to get away from from all the noise, emotional, physical noise. Just get away, and it's only then that you're able to. I feel this is just my own personal thoughts that I've been able to take a different path, a different direction to where I thought was going to get me to where I thought I was going to get, where I wanted to go. And when it comes to that pressure that we're hearing over and over again with the rental crisis and those from your surveys, I can hear them. I can, as you're talking about it, I can almost hear the cries and hear the voices. And this is what I say, if you stop listening to what your friends and your relatives are telling you that property managers are your enemies, you got to befriend them. You've got to be smart. You've got to befriend them. Maybe that's the new approach that you take in order to persuade them, because they're the ones that are going to be talking to the landlord, and they're the ones that are going to give you that tick of approval for that longer lease, as opposed to saying, and sometimes that's what we've got to do, the opposite to what we thought. Go in the different way, go in the different, taking a different curve. But look, I want to give a shout out to two followers of the show that I've been speaking with over the weekend and today. They reached out and they've been sharing their story, and this is why I came up with this. The tip for today was don't give up. One individual had a heart attack early in the year, and he's just told me that his lifelong his wife's just up and left, and they've parted ways. But rather than sitting back and crying woe is me, he's decided to do something about his weight, and he's told me in the last 6-7 weeks he's dropped 7 kilos, and because he wants to get himself back to a physical state that he will, as he says it with a smile, that he will charm his his wife back into that loving relationship that they had for 27 years, which was, and that's an individual that just doesn't want to give up. Doesn't want to give up on love. Doesn't want to give up on his on that marriage. Doesn't want to give up on himself, which is great. And another one that goes in to see a doctor for a scratch on his foot, and next you know they're chopping away on his foot, and now he's got to have braces and all sorts of things and all sorts of complications because of a bad diagnosis from day one. But he's talking on the phone with him today. He was cheerful and looking at at different things that he can do and what he was looking at doing. And that gave me that sense of the shit that I've been going through over the last over the last couple of months is nothing in comparison to what our two viewers have been going through, and they're telling me the story with one I was over the phone, the other one was face to face, with smiles and cheerful as to the outcome that they were following, which is great story, great. It encouraged me like you wouldn't believe.
Good point. Life is a box of chocolates. Some of them chewy, some of them not quite as tasty as you like. But the point there is you've got to hang in there. And I also think it's important, just to underscore something else you said. I see quite a few people just going too far and fast and making too quicker decisions. And sometimes I think it's really important, and I think this is particularly true with property, just take a breath. It doesn't have to be a long breath, but just take a breath and ask yourself, hang on a moment, is this the right move? Have we thought about this right? And sometimes I think just doing that, let's just take a breath and just calm down and just don't get panicked. Don't just jump at the first thing. Those are, I think, important things too, because the point I want to leave the viewers with today is there's always more property, right? There is going to be more property. It's just there will be more property. So whatever people think about the fact that there's never going to, there is more property. It will always be there. So I always think it's important that people don't get bounced into making quick bad decisions, and also make the point. I think it's very important that you've highlighted there. A matter of perspective too. So whilst everybody has issues and factors they've got to take into account, in the realm of things, maybe things aren't quite so bad. Edwin, thanks for that. Great show today. And I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Sydney time, going live. And we will go into some more detailed analysis of the whole question of structural surveys, what to look at. And we'll throw a few case studies in and talk a little bit in more detail about this conundrum about how do you know when you've got enough information to be able to actually know what you're buying. Will do. Looking forward to it, Martin. Cheers. See you then, Edwin. Take care. Bye-bye.